The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are our own, or those of our guests, and in no way represent the views of the companies, associations, or organizations that any of us may work for or represent. All stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they were told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident.
American 80 DSW turn, runway 18 left, line up and wait.
18 left, line up and wait for the last time in an MD-80, American.
American 80 for the last time, wind 1005, RNAV to B-Park, runway 18 left, clear for takeoff.
RNAV B-Park, clear for takeoff, 18 left, American 80, W.
You better make it a good one.
You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast that explores the many pathways to an aviation profession, the challenges that a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Av8rTony, a professional airline pilot currently flying for a U.S. legacy carrier with close to 20 years on the flight line. This is episode 77 of the Squawk Ident podcast, recorded on the 5th of May, 2021, from the Aviator Sound Studios from somewhere in Southern California. On today's episode, Captain Roger and I are joined by one of Legacy Airlines' newest captains. He has survived furloughs, mergers, and multiple turndowns. He is a former Northern Arizona collegiate drum major, a tuba-playing god, an avid pianist, and he even helped me choose out a quality ukulele not too long ago. His journey in aviation has followed a path not often mentioned. We had the opportunity to fly again recently, where I was able to blackmail him into joining us here today. But before we start our pre-flight for episode 77, I wanted to express our many thanks to Kyle Jansen for joining us as a guest host on episode 76, Ditching, New Strategies, and Comebacks. We enjoyed discussing the evolving airline strategies that we have noticed being explored within the recovering U.S. airline market. Thanks again, Kyle. We look forward to having you again on the show real soon. And here to help us get Flight 77 of the Squawk Ident podcast underway is an exceptional aviator and co-host. He is an award-winning trophy-hoisting tennis champion, a professional CFI, II, and MEI flight instructor, a former freight dog, a former airline pilot, a current King Air flight instructor, a Falcon 2000 commander, a captain, and a corporate operator as well. He joins us from his mobile studios from his penthouse suite at the DoubleTree Hotel in Denver, Colorado, where he is fresh off his out-of-country adventure flight sequence to Iceland. Please help me in welcoming back to the show a fantastic co-host, Captain Roger. Captain, how you doing?
I'm hanging in there, Tony. How are you?
I'm hanging in there too. We missed you on the last show. That was because you were flying your butt off, which is kind of a common theme. Our listeners know this.
It does seem to be the common theme these days.
Yeah, and I've been flying kind of heavy too. I've did 2 sequences back to back, 6 days of flying, multiple red eyes. And our next guest today flew with me on my very last sequence here, and we had a wonderful time on a nice 2-day trip. How was your trip? I mean, you had the Iceland adventure, which we're not talking airline here where you have dispatch filing flight plans for you and you have, maintenance making sure that all the checks have been done on the aircraft. You did everything. You had to do everything.
Pretty much.
Is this your first time?
Did everything. Yeah, and it was first time. It was quite the experience, and yet at the same time, it was, which is good, it was very uneventful. Because in the end, a whole lot of the work that you do is on a contingency basis that, if this happens, then we do that. Unfortunately, in the end, it was very uneventful. We flew from the San Diego area up to the Boston area and then over to Iceland. And if you actually look at the distance, Boston is almost exactly halfway. Huh. And so if you just kind of look at it that way, it's like, okay, well, it's just kind of another flight from, San Diego to Boston, except there's just a whole lot of nothing in between.
Yeah.
Although, the only half the flight was over water, because the first half, roughly is over the eastern seaboard of Canada. And, in the end, we didn't see much of the ground. There was a cloud layer and we flew a flight and, came down and landed. Unfortunately, that was the extent of it. Was just another flight, the biggest difference was the time time change. And I'm still not recovered from that.
What is the difference there? Is it
7 hours?
7-hour time difference? And that's
we were laughing. It's like, well, the life that we know out in the Pacific, the Pacific time zone, they weren't even waking up until the afternoon over there in Iceland. It was like, my phone was, you kind of joke sometimes about my phone going off all the time. My phone was very silent for the first half of the day because everyone was sleeping.
Nice.
But then it's odd, you're going to sleep and you're not really sure what time it is. But you're going to kind of sleep at 10 to midnight, but it's still like early afternoon at home. The whole thing was just surreal, and the length of the trip was horrible because you were just starting to acclimate, and then we came home, and but that was the biggest thing that I'll never forget. That, and we're towards the beginning of May and that far north, and it stayed light until 11 o'clock at night.
Well, that kind of helped a little bit, right? I mean,
you have no idea what time it is. I know we spent 3 or 4 minutes just talking about time, but it was just a surreal experience in terms of what time it was and how light it was, and how, even as a pilot and traversing time zones, I mean, going to Hawaii wasn't that big of a deal, and going to the East Coast wasn't that big of a deal. But then you put 4 more hours on top of that, and then the north latitudes. It was just a surreal experience, and I'm still recovering from it. I've been waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning every morning, and not out of choice.
Just because you got used to it. Yeah.
Just because I'm not sure. I think it's just kind of reacclimating back to whatever normal is.
Now, did you fly into Reykjavik?
No. We flew to a little airport in the middle of nowhere. Well, Reykjavik is basically, right on the west coast. And we flew to the north, this little town on the north towards the east side of the island, Kadakureri.
Gesundheit.
Yes, it took me about a week to figure that out, but I dedicated myself to at least trying to say the name right by the time I landed there.
And the adventure
Graced them with my presence.
Did you take the adventure that we were suggesting?
Well, kind of. We attempted to. We went what I refer to as whale looking, where we went out on a boat looking for whales. But we didn't watch.
Watching. Yeah.
Well, that's what most people call it. But in order to watch, you have to find. Of which there weren't. It was admittedly a little early in the season, and they were very upfront with that before we went. And that kind of turned into an adventure in and of itself because of the ride back. But there were no whales that were really there yet, so it turned into a boat ride, which was a beautiful day on the first half, and then the wind kicked up on the way back, and then there were people hanging over the side in the 100-foot boat, and we were. I mean, you're probably talking 8 to 10 foot seas.
Yeah.
And it was freezing cold. We got drenched. And
And you go back to the pub and have yourself a Viking-sized beer.
Yeah. I did eat a lot. I will say that.
Did you have the all-famous and traditional meal of Slátur?
No. No, I did not. But we looked at pictures.
Yeah, if you're curious,
they have a lot of sheep up there.
What we're talking about? Just look up Slátur, Icelandic traditional meal. I believe Sibi and Runar were so gracious to be on the podcast. Back in August of last year.
Was it that long ago?
Well, yeah, because that's when they received their furlough notice week, I believe. But we need to catch up with them again and see how they're doing, our Viking friends over there to the north. But yeah, they talked all about the traditional meal. I'm not going to gross anybody out, but it's basically a cold cut of some kind. Let's just leave it at that. But yeah, I'm glad you made it back. Your adventure was full. And then you flew again after that, right?
Yeah, I think today was today was my first flight back after that. Staying in the western half of the United States, which is always nice.
Yeah.
So we had 3 legs today and then just going back home tomorrow.
Yeah, episode 49, Vikings Take Flight of the Squawk Ident podcast, where we have our Icelandic friends from the north give us a little rundown of their journeys, and we do talk about the Slátur, the traditional Viking meal of the Icelandic people.
All the more for them.
Yeah. No, thanks. Maybe if I go, I'll try it. But, I just want to say thank you again for joining us today. I know you've had a very heavy schedule. You're still recovering from that crazy trip. And
well, you're very welcome. And I'm sure that every, our faithful listeners missed me as well.
Absolutely,
so I felt a duty to come back for the comedic relief and to
give the airline guys a hard time. Come on.
To give the airline guys a hard time. I kind of feel like that's my, I don't know what I'm going to do if I ever go to an airline, because then I'll just be one of them.
And I hope you come to Legacy so that we can hold this every episode and every word above your head for the rest of your career.
I know. I might need to spend a little more time worrying about that.
Don't burn your bridges, ladies and gentlemen. No, we jest. We love Roger. Well, now that our pre-flight is complete, I'll give you a little rundown on what I've been doing here later in the show. But now that our pre-flight is complete, let's get ready to push off the gate and start those virtual podcast engines. Flight 77 of the Squawk Ident podcast is officially underway. Today's guest started his journey in aviation after graduating with a music degree from Northern Arizona University. After graduation, he was accepted into the Initio program for Mesa Airlines back in 1998. With just over 280 hours of total time under his belt, he was selected to fly for Mesa Airlines in the year 2000. That later led him to a promising job opportunity at an airline we hear on the show called Cactus Air. Joining us from his compound deep in the heart of Arizona, please join us in welcoming to the show Captain Jerry Quinn. Jerry, how you doing?
Great, Tony. How you doing?
Doing fantastic. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the podcast. I definitely appreciate it. When you extended me the invitation on our last trip. Terribly exciting, and I'm happy to share my experience, and hopefully it's not as boring as it can sound.
No, not at all.
Make it exciting.
We
try to make.
You and I flew together back in December, I think, was it 2000? And
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, we had a great time.
It was Christmas. It was Christmas. It was Christmas Day. Melikalikimaka, I think was
right.
As we flew to Hawaii.
Yeah.
And I do have to thank you for helping me remember the ins and outs and intricacies of equal time point, as far as it pertains to engine failures and or medicals. Tony was able to bring me up to speed because I hadn't done any Hawaii flying for a while, and I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Tony, very much.
No, it's my pleasure. And we hit it off. You were telling me about your background in music. You were showing me pictures from when you were in the drumline and the band back at Northern Arizona, and I was telling you that I was thinking with COVID and the restrictions and the fact that we're kind of limited on what we can do. The crew hanging out at the hotel in Hawaii is kind of not something that is a norm anymore. And I was thinking about learning an instrument. Why not? And a ukulele is small and compact, and I can throw it on my bag of tricks there on my rollerboard and bring it with me. And you said, well, I have one. And you were making suggestions on which one I might consider purchasing. And sure enough, through a lot of the leads that you gave me, I found something that I liked. And now I'm a proud owner of a very nice ukulele that I've been tickling here for the past few months, trying to learn a few things by watching YouTube. And I have you to thank for that, because I don't know if I would have taken the leap so willingly.
Beautiful. I'm glad you did it. And I'm sure your level of expertise will exceed mine pretty quickly.
I highly doubt
that. I haven't.
You might have an overinflated view of our friend here.
We will see.
I'm
if we do fly together, we're gonna bring them. We're gonna bring them.
Come on, man.
That sounds great.
Yeah, the next time we fly together, we agreed that we would text each other and go, "Hey, we're flying together. Bring your uke. Jam session, buddy."
Absolutely.
So, yeah, and then meanwhile, the flight attendants are back there going, "Who's killing cats up in the cockpit?"
You know, it'd be really funny if you guys had them. You guys both were playing during the boarding process. If the two pilots were up at the boarding door and you guys are both playing a ukulele duet,
serenading
that
our
would
passengers?
be something different. That would be something different.
Yeah, this is not
Be different,
Southwest,
all right.
buddy.
It would be different, and
That would be a
I think
viral
most
video.
of they might turn around and just head right back up the jetway.
Always a possibility.
We can change the lyrics to popular songs and talk about their flight today. Welcome aboard. We're going to Buffalo. You know, I don't know. Oh,
well, I listened to your intro there, and it makes me feel old. Starting in aviation, 23 years ago now. That's crazy.
And yet, Captain, you're younger than me. So what does that make me?
I said it, or you said it. I didn't say it.
Well, you didn't have to. I got you. I'm picking it up. So let's talk a little bit about our last trip, just to kind of reminisce a little bit. I saw your name popped up like kind of last second, like a day prior. Was that because you're on reserve and they gave you the trip, or how did that work?
Yes, I'm squarely on reserve now. As you mentioned, I'm pretty new captain. I'm not new at the airline. I kind of delayed an upgrade a little bit for some quality of life issues, but I live in Scottsdale, Arizona, and now I find myself a commuter to Los Angeles. And I waited until I could hold what we call long call reserve, which is give us a little more time, lead time on our trips when they do call us out. And they called me for that one. And believe it or not, they will be calling me sometime today. I've been assigned a trip for tomorrow. So I had just 2 days off. And I've pretty much resigned myself to the phone, probably ringing every day that I'm on call. It's starting. COVID was a nice break. And it was a nice break for me because I find myself able to hold a line, which I wouldn't by any measure of seniority. But I think a lot of guys were bidding reserve and hoping to not fly. So most of last year I was holding line, and I'll take it, because it enabled me to control some of my destiny and make some money.
Yeah.
But ever since the holidays, I'm squarely back on reserve for the time being, and we'll be flying. Well, yeah, maybe we'll see each other more.
Yeah, and you mentioned something that's quite interesting. And I'll just give a little explanation to some of our listeners that, there are different reserve rules for every airline out there. Every operator has a contract, and some people are on 24-hour reserve where they can call them at any time, and you have a particular amount of time to get to the airport to be ready to go to sign in for your trip. Over at Legacy Airlines, where we have short call reserve, where the time is not really written in stone, but the unspoken word, at least at Los Angeles, is that you have about under 3 hours, 2 to 3 hours maximum to get to the aircraft to be ready to be signed in and good to go. And then there's long call reserve, which is preferred for most people because then you have, 13 hours or 12 hours before you have to make it?
It's 12.
12
hours on long call. Yeah, and I forget the term they use for the short call, like promptly available or something like that.
Right.
But the company does tack on their expectations for an hourly thing, which we deal with. I was a professional reserve for many, many, many years. I think I've been at what we call it legacy for I think like the total now of 16 years, and I'd say 13 of that was reserve. So I got I knew the ins and outs pretty well, day in and day out. But 12 hours long call here. And although they do, when they give you the long call reserve, your monthly guarantee is a little bit less, at least here, than it would be on the short call.
Yeah. So you have like a minimum month. So even if you fly one flight in the entire bidding cycle of 30 days or whatever it is for the month, then you're still going to get paid your minimum monthly guaranteed pay.
Absolutely.
So short call, you get 2.5 hours more a month than if you were long call, something like that?
I think it's 3. I think it's 76 hours guarantee on the short call, and it's 73 hours guarantee on the long call.
Okay.
And it kind of stinks to take that kind of a hit to do the long haul. But I obviously living in Phoenix and doing reserve for Los Angeles, that's the only way I can make that work.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to have it.
And you mentioned, they're going to call you because they've already signed you a trip. And people are like, well, wait a minute. If they didn't call you, how do you know that they're going to sign? Well, because we have an app that the companies, has this, what they call CCI app, crew check-in app. I don't know what it's called, but you can look on there and it'll sure enough, it'll populate. And that could change 2 or 3 times before they call you. They physically call you. That's your official notification. But for the most part, you can kind of get a notification going, oh, your schedule has changed. And you can see you have the trip even before they notify you. And as long as they give you, they don't want to interrupt your rest period, but as soon as they have to call you, they'll give you a call and give you a message if they have to and say, okay.
Yeah, I'm probably going to call them and just tell them that I know about the assignment, because I asked them and they usually do wait till close to the 12-hour mark to call you and assign you. And it's a red eye tomorrow night. So I'd rather them not calling me, 10, 11, 12 or whenever that might be.
Right.
I'm going to call them and tell them I know about it. So
perfect.
4-day trip and a red eye, so it is what it is. I'm going to be flying a lot, and, I'm setting my expectation now that it's going to be a lot of flying from here on out.
Yeah. Yeah. The niceness of being paid to stay at home on reserve, on call, I think is slowly going away now that we're starting to see these numbers creep up and be steady. I know that the past 2 days when we were flying together, every flight was pretty close to full. I don't think we had any flight that had, a row open anywhere.
Yeah. The loads are remaining high. I think this summer is going to be very busy for our airline and other legacies, for everybody, for that matter. That's good.
Yeah, good. Very good. And speaking of our last trip, we had a 2-day. It started out in Los Angeles, ended up going to DFW in the middle of the day. It was one of the first times I didn't either start with a red eye or finish with a red eye, so I was very grateful. And we had a 3-hour sit at DFW. We're able to get some food and make some phone calls, and then we were off to New Orleans in the evening. And a little bit of weather en route, and we kind of were keeping a close eye on it. We had plenty of fuel. I believe we had Ferry fuel on that one. So for those that don't know what Ferry fuel is, it's when you need a certain amount of fuel for fuel to get to your destination and be legal with all the FARs that are required to be followed. And so you have your 45 minutes reserve, any alternate fuel you might need, and dispatch ad, captain ad. There's so many hold fuel, so many fuel contingencies that we plan on for these flights. And we actually had almost double the fuel we needed because of whatever economic reasons. The cost of fuel maybe in Louisiana was a little higher than the cost of fuel in Dallas. So for whatever reason, now you have to keep in mind, dispatchers run a formula, and that added weight of all that fuel increases your fuel burn and your fuel economy. So you have to, the cost savings have to outweigh the added fuel burn and the decreased performance of the aircraft being heavier than it normally would be. So if all the metrics are in place, then you ferry fuel down to your destination, and you basically don't have to fill up for the return leg. So that was, I think, the case, and so we had plenty of fuel.
That was a very good thing too. I saw that, and we would obviously review the weather and before the flight, and saw that, and there was thunderstorms in the vicinity, and I'm not quite sure if it was on the field enough to even make us have, we weren't even required an alternate, but right. But like you said, probably for fuel costs in New Orleans, I have no idea. We had a whole lot of extra fuel on board, and I was totally happy with that, because I was going to probably be calling them and adding a little bit of captain additional fuel, just for whatever contingencies, because there was a decent line of thunderstorms moving into New Orleans, and I'd rather have that extra fuel in the tanks than not. So happy to have it.
And Roger, do you guys, when you're Part 91 operation and you're going into a place, like our scenario was, it was VFR, there was no alternate required, but there was a line of thunderstorms, miles south of the field moving from west to east. And these line of thunderstorms could have easily, unforecastedly changed direction and cover the field. They were close enough. Do you guys ever go with, more fuel than you need, or do you top off the tanks every time? What's the normal thought process for a Part 91 operation?
Well, we certainly don't top the tank off hardly ever, for multiple reasons. We have the advantage. We don't have dispatch. We have, maybe
pilot's discretion.
One captain, or we have maybe two captains, and it's pilots here. I mean, we're the ones that put the fuel order in, and then we hand over the credit card and say, "Here you go," and we're not responsible for paying.
Nice.
So typically, I'm actually probably the most, like, a lot of guys will put on a fair amount of extra gas. I probably run it leaner than most other people. I don't know why. But in the case, like you guys were talking about, in the case that where you've got potential issues with weather, then we'll go ahead and put more fuel on. And to be honest with you, nobody in our operation at Part 91, in most Part 91s, no one's going to know the difference.
Yeah. Well, we had
that's good.
We had a kind of an exciting turn down there. It was my leg to fly down there from Dallas, and we were coming in, and there was a NOTAM issued for the longer runway that had an ILS associated with it. It was shortened, and we had the landing distance available, and we ran the numbers. And although the winds were kind of, you're splitting hairs between, was it runway, I don't even remember, was it 2 and 2?
2-0.
2-0?
It was 2-0.
And 1-1 or something like that?
Yes, yeah.
So we wanted to use an ILS to 1-1, but they were advertising RNAV or visuals to runway 20. So initially in cruise, I had briefed the RNAV to runway 20, and then we were kind of got to talking about it, and like, well, why use the short runway when we can use the longer runway? And currently the conditions on the field are not bad. The winds actually didn't really benefit you from landing on one runway or the other. Why don't we just prep for the longer runway, even with the shortened NOTAM? So I said, okay. So I rebriefed, and Jerry was very attentive to how I was setting up the FMS or the box or the FMGC, however you want to call it. And we briefed that one. And then as we started our descent, the controller, we asked, hey, can we have runway 11 with the ILS? And they're like, well, I don't think they can use that because of the displaced threshold. And then we start thinking about it, and the wheels were turning, and we're like, oh yeah, I guess the glide slope might not be coincident, and who knows. So we didn't really quite look into it enough because it was basically VFR. And they said, yeah, no, we can't give you that. It'll be the RNAV. So fine. I quickly, as we were starting our descent, I just said, okay, I'll just go back to our original briefing. And I put in, the 20 approach in the FMGC. They gave us direct to the first fix, had everything set up. We made sure that the briefing, all the numbers were still applicable. And we went direct to that fix. And as we got a little closer, we were cleared the RNAV approach. We were in VMC conditions. We could see the runway. But then I noticed that on my PFD that the ILS light or indicator was blinking yellow. I'm like, wait, we're not shooting an ILS. We're shooting an RNAV. What? So I voiced this to Jerry. I said, what's this ILS thing? And he goes, did you accidentally put in the ILS to that runway instead of the RNAV? I'm like, I don't think so. So he says, because our eyes were both down, and the autopilot was flying, but our eyes were both down. And he said something I really very much appreciated. He goes, you know what? I'll take care of it. You fly the aircraft. I said, you're right. My aircraft. Yeah. And I brought my eyes back to the attention of the PFD and the MFD and all my instruments. And I had the runway visually. So I quickly put it into heading mode and started navigating using kind of a lower level of automation. The autopilot was still coupled. And he goes, okay, it's all set up. So I recoupled the approach, and sure enough, we executed a relatively flawless approach, but it got busy really fast, and it was because of an error that I made. Now, I'm the first one to admit, if I make a mistake, I made a mistake, and I tried my best at every time to learn from it. And I got to say, Jerry was very kind about it. He wasn't like, "Oh, what did you do?" Because it could. The stress level, and I've flown with guys like that. The stress level can shoot up exponentially in a very short period of time during a critical phase of flight, and I think that could lead, when the threat and error management model isn't really followed, to some major errors. Potentially an accident. So I was very appreciative that we all remained calm and we kind of fixed the little flub that I made, and everything was okay.
Yeah, no, you did a great job. I mean, we talked about it a little bit afterward, how that happened. I think, we had done a nice brief, well up in cruise, and discussed everything we were going to do. But obviously when you get down on with approach control and, you first talk to them and you're only like 30 miles away, and they start assigning you something different than you expected. Now, you're going to, have to quickly change your plan. You don't have to, but I think we felt comfortable enough. We'd already talked about 2-0 in the RNAV that they were offering to that runway, just rethrowing that one in there. But yeah, I mean, it was up. I don't know why they, I guess I surmised the reason they didn't give us the longer runway is I don't know if they felt it wasn't good enough for VFR or clearing us for a visual to that runway, but obviously they didn't have maybe any approach to offer. I don't know the ins and outs of what their rules are, but they said 2-0, and it was fine and it was safe. But yeah, I'll tell you what, I've been flying the Airbus for a long time, and I can see how with a newer person to the plane in that situation, how it could get dicey. It's very easy in that situation to both have your heads down and looking at a box to try to set it up, and if you forget that, oh my God, I'm an aviator, I can just turn this autopilot off and I see the PAPIs and I see the runway threshold right there. I can fly to it,
Right.
So
well said.
Yes, exactly. You did that, and it was just me, a couple of keystrokes changing over to the RNAV from, I think a localizer was in there, and then just hitting a few buttons, and then that's a backup for us, to get to the runway. Yeah. So yeah, no big deal, but yeah, I can see how, not knowing maybe the box or how quickly you can do that, thinking things are going to be really screwed up, but yeah, it was handled. And that's what threat and error management is trapping errors. We all make errors. We all make many errors, and we know that they're going to be made. The idea is to trap them and give us many different opportunities to trap those errors. And I think obviously that one was a blinking ILS light, so automation right there helped us trap that error.
Yeah. In the end, it was visual conditions. The runway was dry. We could see the weather out to the south and southwest. And the aircraft in front of us, I believe, asked for an alternate mist procedure in the event of a mist, because I believe the mist approach procedure had you turning into the weather, and they didn't want to do that. So, and we heard that, and we were like, oh, they asked for an alternate mist. In case we go mist, we'll probably ask for the same thing. But yeah, it was VFR. It was totally, but yeah, back to the lowest level of automation possible, if you can, to get realigned, and that's exactly what happened. I know Roger, sees this quite a bit in his instructing and in his especially in the King Air, trying to get people recurrent, and they're doing instrument approaches in a simulator, and people can get overwhelmed really quickly.
I have to laugh because this is like, you see it all the time, and listening to your story, I was on mute and I'm laughing over here. It's like, Captain Tony, well, let me set the stage for you. There we were, and we had a blinking light, and I saw the runway.
So, land.
So there you go.
That's the end of the story.
Instead, we've got two pilots, two highly qualified, experienced pilots who both, instead of clicking the autopilot off to fly to the runway that they see down there, we've got both of our heads down so that we can program the FMS so that, God forbid, we don't need to fly our own airplane. And it just makes me kind of laugh, because in the end, the lower level, screw the lower level automation, turn it off and fly to the runway that you see right down there.
Yeah.
But it happens all the time, is that people, it's almost kind of like we've spent so much time training people to not screw up and let the box fly the airplane, that it's like, well, we better let the box fly the airplane, and then things can kind of start, the snowball starts rolling downhill in a little bit of your guys' scenarios. Like, well, we gotta figure this out so the airplane knows where to fly, because we're not supposed to fly the plane on our own.
Yeah.
To such a large degree. And that's one thing that, from, my brief, comparatively brief airline experience, that's what they hammer into you. Is like, don't fly the airplane. Have to turn the autopilot on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I appreciate about our training now at our legacy carrier is I think they realize that. I mean, we are so automation dependent, and we use it. That's all we do for when things are going well. That on myself, after doing it for years and years and years, feel like I've forgotten how to fly. You don't feel comfortable in that situation. So they've added that to the training, and I believe on every recurrent training we do, we get in the simulator, it'll be a scenario where it's like, all right, you're going to do just a simple pattern without anything. You don't have any automation. I think you turn the autopilot off, you turn the flight director off, you turn it all, and just your auto throttle is off, and just remember how to fly a plane. And it's great to get back to that, because we all should know how to do it. We all know how to do it. It comes back, and we need to see it and know that we can do it before we start just deciding to tinker in a box, and so we don't have to do it. But I get it.
Yeah. It's a really interesting subject. And this was a long time ago that Airbus was a 330 that crashed off of Brazil on the way back to Europe. There was a great article in Vanity Fair, I think it was, about automation, and them having some issues with the pitos, and then them trying to fly the airplane. But it basically, the gist of it is that we spent so much time having all these mistakes, and we're going to push automation on the pilots. Automation. But what that did was that when things go really wrong and then we have to fly the airplane, we've flown the airplane so little that we don't know how to respond to it. But then the response to that is, well, the pilots can't fly. We got to push automation, more automation. And it's almost like a negative feedback loop where we're trying to shove all this automation on, but then that's going to degrade the skills when they're kind of needed the most. And I never really thought about that, but there is a lot of truth to it too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had to prove to myself that I could still fly. Back in the mid 2000s, one of my downturns was 2008, the Great Recession, and I got furloughed, and faced with what am I going to do? I had a couple opportunities that went away. Numerous jobs fell through at different times. It was a very bad time for me as a furloughed airline pilot. But one of the things I was going to do was go back and fly a 1900D. And I had to swallow my pride as a big Airbus driver, to go back to something like that and be paid so little. But I was happy to do it because there was nothing else right at the time. And I needed to stay current. But one of the things was, what? I trained back in the day when I was younger to fly a 1900, and I never got to. And I was eager to fly it because all my friends, and when I was in flight school, I spoken so highly of that plane. And it was a company called Great Lakes. I'm sure you both heard of Great Lakes. I swallowed my pride, and I got hired and went there. And I was eager to see if I could still fly. Having flown Canadair, regional jets with the glass, and then of course the Airbus, which is a whole new level, with an auto throttle that's doing its thing. But I can tell you that it comes back very quickly, getting in that six pack again, and the RMI needle and the NDB and just doing it all without an autopilot. It took me a week or so to feel comfortable, but it did.
Yeah.
So I'm telling every aviator out there, if you can all fly, get out there and do it.
Yeah, for sure. So we had this little bit of an adventure on our last leg, where it got busy the last 10 minutes of the flight. Of course, at the most critical time, that's always when it happens. And, we handled it very well. And we got on the ground. It was raining off and on, but pretty much the weather was staying south of the city, the town. So here we were in the Big Easy. And we got in at a relatively decent time. It was dark, but still the night was was early enough to where we could go out and get a meal. Can you believe it? Post-COVID times, I mean, we're not really out of COVID times, but we can actually go and get a meal together as a crew, and we did. We went downtown on Bourbon Street and took a walk. I was actually pretty impressed at how many people were down there. What did you think, Jerry?
Yeah. I'll tell you the truth. I still have not experienced Bourbon Street the way it's meant to be. I've only been there twice now. They've been overnights, but the first one was smack dab in the middle of big COVID lockdown and no bars open, and went with a flight attendant crew that was all getting furloughed back at the end of the summer, and took them out to eat, and we had a good labor. But they told me, obviously, you're not seeing Bourbon Street the way it's meant to be seen. And even after this particular overnight, I still say that I probably have not seen Bourbon Street the way it's meant to be seen. It was a lot busier than the first time. I mean, bars were open, the music was loud, there was people, but it certainly wasn't shoulder to shoulder people. It was sparse. I'd consider. Maybe it got better later on because we didn't burn the midnight well.
We were done pretty early. We're old men. No, but we had a good time. We ate at a really cool restaurant I wanted to mention. It's your second time eating there. You ate there last time.
Yeah.
And through your recommendation, we went there. It was nice. A place called Mondo's right there on Bourbon Street.
Mambo's.
Mondo's, yeah.
Mambo's with a B.
With a B? Like Mambo
Bravo.
number 5?
Exactly.
Okay, so there you go. And then we went to or walk around just to kind of see the sights and the architecture and all the French Quarter, and then we ended up at Bourbon Street Drinkery. Now I've been there a few times. Live music. It was, I think it was great. We were people watching, and there was definitely some people that had a few too many drinks. I feel bad for the lady who was probably going to be exhausted because all she did was run back and forth from the front of the bar to the back of the bar to the front of the bar to the back of the bar.
Yeah.
Her friends were kind of keeping an eye on her, just letting her, burn that candle. But it was definitely a good time, some good music. And, we've talked about this before on the podcast, is that, every once in a while, you do get a decent overnight, decent layover with a good crew, and you get to go out and hear some music and meet people, and it's great. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, take advantage. Take advantage of the good ones, and there's bad ones. I'm not going to lie, but if you got a good place and you got a good amount of time, take advantage. I was discussing it with the last first officer I think I flew with. How through the different airlines I've been at and how much time I've been there, the attitudes have changed. And I think it's just because I've gotten older, that we don't do as much as we used to. Former airline, the question wasn't whether or not you're going to go out and have dinner or get drinks if you have enough time to do something like that. The question was, where are we going? What time are we meeting? And it was like, we're all, it's a given. When you get a little older and you're at the legacy and everybody's a little bit older, there's not as much going on in that respect. But if you can and you have the opportunities, take advantage of them while you're out. It's
those moments that really are the ones you're going to remember when you're in retirement. It's not all those hundreds and thousands of hours of flying along. But our day 2 was relatively uneventful as well. And the only thing I wanted to speak about is the fact that we ended up going through Phoenix and then off to Los Angeles. And, we talked about it. You were like, yeah, don't worry about getting us there quickly because there's just no way for me to commute back home. And then we had this discussion about commuting and how it sucks and really is a different career when you don't have to commute. I've been fortunate enough and unfortunate enough to have both commuted for over a decade, and now past 4 years I've not had to. So I made my best effort possible to get us into Los Angeles early, which we did. We landed a bit early, but you ended up having to get a hotel. It sucks.
Yeah.
But
it is what it is. You choose that. If you decide to live somewhere else besides your base, or sometimes your base changes underneath you. I understand that, but I've been fortunate enough in my career, 21 years now, that 20 of them, I'd say, maybe 19, have been living in the domicile and driving to work every day.
Yeah.
And it's spoiling. It's beautiful. Through a couple different airlines, living in the Phoenix area and just getting to drive to my training sessions too. We had both of those airlines had training in the Phoenix Valley, and I could just drive there. And now under legacy here, driving to a different city to go to training, and obviously commuting to LA. I did it to myself, choosing to be based in LA, leaving Phoenix to upgrade. And it's a choice you got to make, quality of life, or if you want to, move seats, or, have to have the money. And I was ready, having spent the better part of 14 years sitting in the right seat of the Airbus. I was ready for that move. Yeah. So, but the commute it is what it is. You gotta do it if you're going to choose the upgrade route. And Phoenix to LA is not that bad. It's normal times. There's a lot of flights. Granted, they do get full, and I've heard some stories. But a former airline, commuter airline that I used to work at, when I decided to go ahead and upgrade there, it was a much longer commute. It wasn't by choice. I was actually a quality of life guy back then, living in Phoenix, waiting until I could be a CRJ captain in Phoenix, which was actually kind of a more senior position. And I got awarded it. And when I was in training, they turned around and, I think one of our other domiciles or bases was shrinking with a bunch of senior guys. It may have been Denver, and they were all getting displaced, and they all coming back to Phoenix, which was, their next choice. And I got flushed out before I even started. I'm in training. I've accepted training. I'm in training. And they say, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to go back to the right seat to remain in Phoenix? Or you can continue to upgrade and you'll be in Nashville or Washington, D.C., Dulles. And I could already taste the fourth stripe and the money. And I was there. I'm like, I guess I'm going to do that. And I actually chose Dulles because my mother and stepfather at the time were living in the D.C. area. So I didn't need to get a crash pad.
Nice.
But I'll tell you what, I did a cross the country commute for the better part of a year. And never again. That was ridiculous.
Yeah. Now I did that one myself from LA to New York.
That's right. I remember you telling me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was 8 months of hell. I mean, the flying was fun and the experience was fun. I'm glad I had the experience, but man, the quality of life that really suffered. The family suffered on that. We are really having a good time having this conversation about what we've been up to. And I do want to get into your journey. And we're going to do so right after the break. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from the break. We're talking today to Captain Jerry from Legacy Airlines, and we've been talking about all the little things that we've been going through with flight schedules and threat and error management issues that we were able to fly the airplane at its lowest level of automation for a moment to correct issues that I made on the flight line and some of the issues that we're seeing in today's marketplace. Now we're going to dive into Jerry's journey, which, I'm really excited to have you on the show today because we kind of talked about this the first time we flew together last year, and then we flew again last week, and kind of brought all those topics of discussion back up. And I really found it interesting that your journey is not quite standard. It's, the path you took was a little unique. And, thank you for agreeing to share that with us. But let's start at the beginning. What sparked this passion for aviation? How old were you when you first decided, oh, look, airplane?
Yeah. Well, that's going to be typical to most pilots. At a really young age, I loved aviation. Everything about it. I really liked military aviation. That was really what I was looking at. Through really young, grade school years, I loved making the model jets and going to air shows and everything there was to know about military aviation. I was looking into it, and I thought about going to the Air Force Academy when I was I think I was still in like 5th or 6th grade at that point. But then somewhere along the lines, I realized that I wasn't going to be able to be a pilot, at least not in the military, because I have asthma. I've been an asthma sufferer my whole life. It's never stopped me from doing anything in my life, but it's been there. I can't deny it. I'm not going to, lie about it. Take approved medications for it, now, obviously. But yeah, back then I thought, okay, and that is the case. An asthma condition is going to eliminate you from going into the military and flying military, aircraft. So it kind of just went away. Somewhere along the lines, I thought I'd maybe want to do it and be an aeronautical engineer. But that wasn't, terribly to love. And you grow and you start learning, to do other things that interests you might have. And music was one through junior high into high school. And at some point I made the decision that I was going to study music and on my way to being an educator, that's what I was going to do. I was going to be a high school band director. And I made the choice, and aviation was way out of my mind at that point. It was something that I liked when I was a kid, but had gone away. And what did I do? I got scholarships and studied music at a four-year school here in Arizona, Northern Arizona University. And really, I liked what I was doing. I think I dropped the education part of my music after about a year, realizing that I don't think I want to be at least like a public school educator. I think, I'd really like to teach college. That was more respected, and I'll be a college professor. And so I dropped the music education, which entailed student teaching and all the rest, and just studied music performance, playing the tuba, which I did. And I think it wasn't until about my junior year, I started realizing there's a lot of people that want to do exactly what I want to do. And a lot of competition. And again, the pay is not, it takes a while to get to a level where you're going to make decent pay, as a collegiate educator. And the list is long. Everybody wanted to do it. So I started thinking hard. I'm like, you know what? Maybe I should be looking into something else. And, being, I guess, pragmatic, at a young age about really what's going to make me happy in life. I hate to say it, but I wanted to make a decent living is one part of it.
Sure.
And I've obviously wanted to choose something that I like to do as well. And I was finding that I think I was going to be more frustrated in music than anything, and starting to look for something else. And then it just hit me, that aviation was there, and I loved it from when I was a kid. And I don't even remember the conversation I had with somebody that I'm like, I think I could be a pilot. I could be an airline pilot in this day and age. You don't have to be a military pilot. You can go through commuter airlines and building time and that way to get to a major carrier. And you can have asthma too. It's not a special issuance. It's nothing special on your medical. I just have to check the box that I have it. They, now they have this day and age made it a little more difficult on the hoops I have to jump through, which is unfortunate. But no, that's no problem at all. But once I realized I could, I just jumped right in. I started looking into flight schools. I'm like, I'm going to continue to get this degree. I had my senior year to go, I think, for my 4-year degree in music. And then I'm going to look into flight schools and see how I can make a career and try to get to that point of being an airline pilot. Graduated with my Bachelor of Music in Instrumental Music Performance over at NAU. And at that time, I had already looked into flight schools. And there was one particular one that wasn't too far from where I was. I was in Flagstaff, Arizona, which is northern Arizona. And Arizona has a lot of training, a lot of schools. It's one of the big places people come to train. But not too far from where I was in Flagstaff was Farmington, New Mexico, just on the other side of the Navajo Nation there in the Four Corners area. Mesa Airlines, their headquarters was there at that time, and they had a small flight school. And I remember hearing about it from somebody I think I worked at Dillard's with. whose husband had gone through the school and now was a 1900 first officer for Mesa and based in Flagstaff, and looked into the program, and it was right up my alley. I had a 4-year degree. I didn't need to go get more traditional schooling. I needed my ratings.
Yeah.
And I needed to try to get to an airline as quick as possible. That's what everybody really aims to do, I think. And that school was there. I think at the time, unfortunately, it's not there anymore. And even if it was, the opportunity that I got, you can't do anymore with some of the regs. We talked a little bit on the flight, FAR 117, and the amount of time you have to get just to a regional airline. But anyways, it was called Mesa Airlines Pilot Development, and it was a great opportunity. It was a 5-semester program. It was tied to the community college or 2-year school that was there in Farmington. So you did have to go through some general studies classes, which I begrudgingly, had to do to get an associate's degree. I think it was Associates of Applied Science and Aviation Technology. It was a nice long title, but we were all there to get our ratings and work at the end of this program for Mesa Airlines. But yeah, 5 semesters. It took you through your private. It was ab initio, I think you mentioned at the very beginning of the program. Take you from square one. No flight, no experience necessary. Private, commercial, instrument, multi-engine. And then at the 5th semester, we got time in the 1900. We did 40 hours in a procedure trainer, and then actual 10 hours in the actual aircraft with an instructor in a crew environment. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the program, when you completed the program, you were guaranteed an interview with Mesa. And it was just an interview. You could still not get hired, basically, if you didn't play your cards right, or if you were not a nice person, so to speak. You could still complete the program and not get hired. So, but the beauty of that program was there was no CFI requirements and no flight instructing. I came out of the school with under 300 hours of flying, and I went right to a commuter airline, which was at the time was a great opportunity. I think now in the years that followed, a lot of airlines were starting to hire guys with very, very low time. They were really looking for pilots. But then 1,500, 2,000 hours or more, was what guys were applying with. So for me to come out of that school and be in that opportunity, or to go right to the commuter, was great. And I think I touched on this with you on our flight, that I trained for the 1900D, and I was going to be very excited to fly it for Mesa. And when I came out of the school, Mesa's needs were changing. Their fleet was changing. They were getting rid of 1900s. And I think this was 99, 2000. So RJs were just hitting it big. There were a lot being ordered, and they were growing that fleet. So when I got to my interview, the guy interviewed me, said, "How would you feel about going right into an RJ ground school?" And, I was scared and excited, and they say what you would say at any interview. I'll gladly go wherever you need me to go, wherever the needs there. I'll go there. I'll do it. So that's what I got put into. Me and 7 other guys from that school. It was the first time anybody from that school had been put into an RJ. Right into the CRJ with less than 300 hours. It was incredible journey.
Yeah, and that wasn't an easy journey for you either. I mean, we had a little bit of a discussion about the program itself. I said, how is that program catered to where it has such a success rate with low time? And you were mentioning to me a lot about the stress that was involved and the way the program was designed. What can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was great flight training. I did my first flight in a training environment was in a Bonanza A36. So right into the complex and high performance from square one. And I didn't know any different. I still, to this day, I've never flown a Cessna aircraft. Yeah. Wow. I mean, I've flown some Warriors, so, but I never trained into like I said, that was the first thing we did was fly, retracting the gear and adjusting the prop and stuff like that. So, and they made the program stressful on purpose, I believe. I think that they knew that the opportunity they're going to give you, and they knew the kind of people that they needed in the cockpit with that little bit amount of time, and they wanted to see if you could handle that, that pressures of being an airline pilot. So we had strict deadlines we had to follow. It wasn't like go to fly at your own pace, and when you're done, we'll give you no, you had to complete each semester by the deadline. And if you didn't, we had a end of semester deadline. And then 1 week later, you had to rush through if you hadn't completed by then. Drop dead date, they called it. And they did ask people to leave the program if they weren't done by that date. Wow. So, yeah, there was many stressful times during the course of that 5 semesters. But, yeah, I mean, we had something called Lotto. They didn't have a lot of planes, and they had a lot of students and not a lot of planes. So you can only be on the schedule for 4 days out. I think they only gave you 4 days. And then if you weren't on there, you can only be on there twice. You can't just hog the schedule. And if you weren't on there twice already, you showed up the next morning for something we called Lotto, where we put our name on a little number and they pulled it out of a hat kind of a deal. And then you got to put your name in the schedule. And I'll tell you what, a lot of mornings by the time they pulled your name, your plane was full and your instructor was full, and you're not going to be on the schedule that day. So guess what? You show up a lot of the next morning. So I mean, scenarios were already set for you that even if you were a great student and aviator, and you're going to do very well, that you can fall behind and be very stressed because you didn't get on, Lotto, kind of, you were unlucky for a week or so, and then when you did get on, you had some weather or you had aircraft maintenance, and now you find yourself a week behind, and people are checking off boxes of their, of the lessons we had to complete before a stage check, and you haven't started, and now you're just worried. And but that's what they set it up that way on purpose, I believe. And they knew of the incredible opportunity they were giving you, and they knew that. This program, the way it's set up, when you come out of it, you ain't going anywhere else.
Right. You'll put up with it because
exactly.
Because who else gets a job at 300 hours? I mean,
it wasn't lost on them that when you got hired at Mesa too, you're probably going to be putting up with a lot. You'll put up with a lot because where are you going to go?
And you're used to it, right? So you ended up on the CRJ training program at Mesa. This was in the year was it 2000?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how did that training go for you?
It went well. It was, again, 300 hours, and now I'm learning a jet aircraft. But I was prepared for that because for the last year and a half, I was learning something new every semester, something I'd never done before in a fast-paced environment. So this is just doing it again. I'm learning turbine aircraft in the airlines training environment, but it was no different from what I've been doing. So, it went fine, got through it. Mesa never paid for the nice slots for the simulator. I think they always paid for what was left over at flight safety. Because when I first got there, we didn't have our own simulators. We were at flight safety. Wow. And of course I got the 12 a.m. to 4 a.m. sim slot. So you get you do the pre-brief at 10 p.m., sim at midnight, get out at 4, debrief, and the sun's coming up. I'm like, how is that conducive to good training? Hindsight being 2020. But again, what did I know back then? It's like, this must be how it is, and now we have to handle it. And you do. Yeah.
And once you got out on the flight line, did you feel any of the prejudices against low-time pilots? I mean, the reason I ask is I know when I was over at Sandpiper, I went over with a lot of time, not because I did that on purpose, but because I thought that's what I needed. I didn't find out later until I was actually already employed. You went to that flight school? We had a program with them. Why didn't you come over at 500 hours? Like, wait, what? I'm 1,000 hours later. What?
Knowledge is power.
But then as time progressed, I think we had that kind of cyclical nature of the industry where we were hiring 350-hour pilots as well. And here I was an FO, senior FO at that, and flying with captains going, oh, thank God. I'm like, what's the deal? But then I know some of those pilots that had low time and they were fantastic. Radio work was always a challenge. I mean, it's a challenge for me, and I have close to 1,600 hours or 16,000 hours now. And so I can understand some of the challenges, but you were telling me that there's always a little bit of that where they look sideways at you and go, 300-hour guys.
Yeah.
How
I
did
don't
that-
think they'd ever say it right to my face, but I know that, obviously it was going around. I mean, I when I did talk to guys kind of off the record and captains, they did say that people that came out of my school were well prepared. Maybe they were just blowing sunshine up my rear end. But yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, we lacked real world experience, and maybe an experience on weather, and line operations and talking on the radio and things of that nature, which would make it hard on a captain to deal with you as a first officer. I because later on, I think 4 years later, when I upgraded, I experienced the same thing, flying with people that came out of the school that I came out of, and saying, okay, this is what it's like being over here, sitting next to a guy like I was 4 years ago. But they all said this, the same thing. Stick and rudder skills were there. We could fly the plane. It's just what are you going to do? I mean, but there is sometimes a stigma for coming out with that kind of time. And I just had to say, hey, the military does it every day. If the training is there and it's good quality training, then every hour you do is going to be jam packed with learning, that kind of stuff.
Uh-huh.
And it can be done, it's not unheard of, and in Europe, they'll put guys coming out of schools like this right into, transport category, like narrow bodied aircraft, or heck, wide body, I've heard. So yeah. It's going to be, and you touched on it. I think that it ebbs and flows on the amount of experience and time pilots have when they are going to their first airline or whatever airline they're going to. And, absent COVID, which is hopefully just was a blip, in some decent expansion of our airlines and hiring, we're going to experience that again. And some of these airlines putting in, what do they call it? Schools. What's the term they use?
Cadet program that they're doing now.
Yes, cadet program where they're selecting you. Uh-huh. Again, with the idea that they're going to help train you, they're going to train you their way, and you're going to be for them when you get done. That's kind of what I was doing.
Yeah, I think they know what to expect when they've selected a candidate. I know on the last show we talked about some of the news that came out with United now being one of the airlines that is hiring really straight off the street and zero time pilots that are going through their version of an ab initio program where they get hired, then they get their private pilot, and United has bought a flight school that is now going to get them through under low time. And of course, they're going to have probably a restricted ATP program commensurate with another university where they're going to get an aviation sciences degree. But it's kind of like the program that you went through, just the newer version of it. Yeah. A post FAR 117.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're going to have to build time somehow, but to get 1,500 to go to a commuter airline part.
Or was it 1,000 hours with a restricted ATP and a college degree? Is that, am I remembering that?
A couple different carve outs
to get it down to that 1,000 for the restricted ATP.
Is that what it is, Roger, or is it 1,300?
I thought you could get it down to 1,000.
1,000.
Although admittedly, I'm definitely not up on this, but I thought you could get it down to 1,000 hours now.
I think you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then you applied to Cactus Air while you were there at Mesa as an FO, and you applied. You didn't hear back for a couple of years, but then in 2005 you got the call, and there you were, a captain on a CRJ. How was that going over that way? I applied to Cactus. It was they had a lot of people that worked at Mesa just because we had a big operation in Phoenix, we did a lot of their express, for a number of years, and I grew up in Phoenix, and so I'm kind of a hometown boy, and I grew up around that airline, and I had a lot of respect for them, and they were not doing well when I was in 2000 getting hired at Mesa.
They had some bad operational years, and the reputation was not good. But over the years, September 11th happened. Some industry turmoil. They got a new contract. They cleaned some things up. So around that time, 03, 04, they were hiring again. One of the few that were. And I decided that would be a good opportunity for me. That would be because I certainly wanted to get out of the regionals. I didn't want to spend too much time there. The longer you stay, the harder it is to leave. So that get out there early. And I applied, and I think I applied as an FO because I think that they did not have a requirement for PIC, turbine PIC. And they did hire a few Mesa pilots that were just first officers. And I'm like, I'll try that. I'll definitely do it. But it wasn't until I finally was able to get a class and they spooled up. I think I was a captain on the CRJ at Mesa when they finally called my number.
What was the difference between regional initial training and a major airline training? Was there a big difference?
There is. I think there is. I mean, at least from the regional that I came from. I can't speak for others, but I'm not going to say that I didn't get good training. One of the things I think was different is that they had an atmosphere at the major airline where they're going to help you through no matter what happened. You're there, they hire you, they like you, they're going to get you through training. They know that you're a pilot. If you come to this level, and believe it or not, when I went to Cactus, we had to do a simulator part of the interview. So they're going to find out if you're an aviator through that. So they know. I mean, so when you're in training, it's like, relax. Here's the information. We're going to go through it. Obviously, you have timelines and stuff, but it was very much like, where when you're at the commuter and you're at your first, they are like, all right, I got 10 guys behind you, so you better not screw this up, or that's the feeling.
Exactly.
It may not be that way, but that's the feeling they give you because they want to. I don't know. They want to see you squirm. Maybe
that's what they told us to Sandpiper. They're like, look to your left, look to your right. One of you guys, or both of them, or maybe you. You're not going to make it, so study up. Like, wait, what? Definitely a change in atmosphere. I think.
Yeah, night and day, training wise, and then when you get on the line too. I mean, I guess I could tell this story. It's been long enough, and they know sometimes as pilots, when we call in sick, it's sometimes to help our schedule and not necessarily a sickness. But I was brand new at Cactus, and I had come out of Mesa, and Mesa's an environment where you call in sick for a trip. They're most likely going to transfer you to your chief pilot, who's going to give you 20 questions and wonder why you can't work and just lean on you. And I'm ready for that. I used to have to practice my sick voice. So my first call where I had to make a sick call at Cactus, I'm ready. I'm like, I think I was telling, because we were going to a wedding, and I'm telling my wife, what, do I sound sick? Like, is that good enough? Is it scratchy enough? What should I tell them? Cold? Should I tell them? And so I get on and I talk to them and I said, I'm just going to have to call in sick. I'm not feeling well for the next trip. And just to hear her say, okay, we got you down. Call us when you're well. And I'm like,
what?
What? I just couldn't believe it. Just the night and day, just the way you're treated. Obviously your contract is usually, better with work rules. It certainly was coming from, when I was at Mesa. So yeah. And like I said, good training, not stressful training.
Yeah.
Just good quality training.
Yeah. Roger, did you ever call in crew scheduling at your time at the airline and go, I'm not going to make it?
Oh, no, wait. I did. It was for commuting purposes.
Uh-huh.
I didn't make too many flights.
Yeah.
But I wanted to get paid, so I called in sick instead.
So you're like, I'm not going to make my commute. It's full. I'm going to get booked off, so I'm not even going to try. I'm just going to call in sick.
No, I was actually at the airport. I remember calling from the airport and I had missed, I don't know if it was one flight or two flights, just because I was, I don't know, maybe not a good employee at that point. I'm not sure. And I had missed a flight, and I was standing at the airport. I remember that now, and I just called in sick. I mean, the commuting had gotten so bad at that point, like, and I had a couple turns dropped for commuting, and I didn't.
Oh, those are the worst. Yeah.
And so, you sacrifice the pay, which is fine and understandable, but I couldn't keep doing that. And so screw this, man. I'm just going to go home. I get paid.
Right. Yeah. You had, I think we call that, I hate to say it, but anal glaucoma. Have you heard of this term? When you can't see your ass going to work?
I can't say I've ever heard that. I'm not big on that kind of stuff. I guess I'm too much of a straight arrow, and it makes me feel horrible to think about doing crazy stuff like that. But
yeah, I've been told I'm a what do you call it? The Boy Scout. Yeah, stop being such a Boy Scout.
Yeah, that's kind of me
sick.
too.
And then I go through my whole stages of sick. I'm like, yeah, this is Chris scheduling. This is First Officer Tony. I don't think I'm gonna make it. I got laryngitis.
Which I never thought about at the time, because that's what everybody did. That's what okay, I gotta focus on making myself at least sound tired and not good. But there are so many sicknesses to have, or so many ailments to have.
Yeah, you don't want to go overboard.
It should preclude you. Well, I'm just saying that there are so many things that would or should preclude you from going to work that have nothing to do with me. Right. Sounding like you've got a cold. Yeah. Everyone goes right to the cold. Yeah. I got a cold.
My neighbor was breathing on me. I think he has COVID, so I got to stay out for 2 weeks with pay. Thank you. Bye bye.
I've got a migraine headache. I mean,
sinuses, anything. I don't know. Yeah, there's so many reasons why you should not fly, and you should call in sick. And we kind of make light of it here, but flying sick is like the most irresponsible thing you can do as a pilot. Right. Especially if it's something that's infectious or takes you out of your A game, because now you're a hazard on the flight line. And if you're not feeling well, despite the jokes that we have here today, if you're not feeling well, and we've said this many times before on the podcast, is use the sick. That's what they're for. If you have to get a doctor's note, so be it. At a major or a mainline carrier, they're not going to ask you for that unless it's a major issue that could potentially be a jeopardy for your medical, your FAA medical. But if you're not feeling well, you have hay fever, allergies, by all means, don't go flying and make it worse. Or if you just have the sniffles, it's just allergies. Are you sure? Could you have a cold? I think now things have changed in this past year, that people are not hesitating anymore.
Everyone's hypersensitive and hyper vigilant about everything.
Yep. So, and that's a good thing. So yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing that with us, Jerry. We've all been there.
You rebel.
I'm the only one, and I never did it again. I just for the record, that was the last time.
One time,
one time only.
That airline that doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, exactly. So you were hired there, and you were fortunate enough to get a base at home. So home base, no need to commute on a wonderful airplane, and you've pretty much stayed on there, but you weren't originally selected to be on the Airbus, right? You were hired on to something else?
Oh, yeah. When I first got to Cactus, I was one of the junior guys in the class. They usually determine it by your age for the class. Sometimes they'll do it by social security number, but they did it by age. And I even whether it was at Mesa or Cactus, that I was one of the younger guys. So I believe we had I don't remember the exact number, say 20 in our class, and we had 16 slots from the Airbus and 4 for the 737. And again, I was happy to be there and would have flown anything gladly, but I had my eye on the Airbus. It looked very comfortable, and coming out of a glass cockpit, I thought, I'll stay in the glass cockpit. I know what I'm doing in that environment. We had Cactus had some older 737s and had a lot of them with different looking cockpits, different engine configurations, and everything was every single one seemed to have something different. I'm like, I'd rather do the Airbus. But anyways, I was fourth junior guy in class. So, and talking to everybody, it became evident that I was going to get a 7.3 slot. And I'm okay, it is what it is, but I'll do it. I like the Airbus. And basically before going to the systems for the aircraft, I talked to somebody and he told me that he was interested in doing the 737. He was one of the senior guys, and no one had ever said that yet. So I was really happy that he said that. And he told me that he was going to take it. So it opened up the last Airbus slot, and I got the last Airbus slot. And I've been on the plane ever since, and I love it.
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine, we've had the opportunity to interview some amazing pilots here on the show, and it's not an uncommon story, whether it's at a commercial airline or in the military to get slots for a particular aircraft in the military. It always comes down to kind of the same thing, whether that's by age or by points on a test or sometimes you're like, what do I need to do to get the plane that I want? And, with commercial airlines, we're a little bit more limited in the techniques that we can use. But to have somebody that's senior to you go, I don't know, I'm thinking about 70. Oh, yeah, you should totally do that. And you ended up on the bus, and I'm glad you did. But you survived more than just your initial training and the program. You ended up getting on with an airline at a time post 9/11 era, and you still saw some downturns and some initial mergers between Cactus Air and what we'll call All American Air. All American Air was an East Coast carrier, and Cactus Air was a West Coast carrier, and I mean that was what 2004. So that was that right before you got there or right after?
No, that was right after I got there. I got hired with Cactus. I think there may have been 3 or 4 classes after me before we experienced that particular merger. There's ups and downs in this career. You're going to go through them. I mean, our hope is that we just happen to coast through at the right times and not have to experience any of that. I was on that track, so to speak. I mean, I get in and out of the commuter unscathed by 9/11. We did furlough at the time. I was senior enough to not have to get furloughed. And then going to Cactus, they announced the merger shortly after I got there, and I got on the line, and I knew things were going to be different, Yeah. And I stayed junior because of fights over seniority and not being able to put together the 2 lists that traditionally, like they normally are. They, you usually put it together pretty quickly and move forward. But we stayed separate for many years, fighting in and out of federal court and what have you. So I stayed junior on my side, and because I stayed junior, I did experience furlough in 2008 with the Great Recession. It's just decimated everything, and it was a terrible time to lose a job in any industry, aviation or what have you. Yeah. Everybody seemed to be out of work, but I did go out, and I went out for 2.5 years. And I think we touched this a little bit. It just wasn't a good, it wasn't a good time. Yeah. I had opportunities. Things were lined up to do some cool stuff, and they would fall through in ridiculous fashion for me. A couple of different jobs, one overseas, a couple overseas opportunities, one back here at a commuter, fall through. And then I think I was an enrollment counselor for an online college for about a year. Yeah. Anything to pay the bills. What are you going to do at the time? Like I said, a lot of people out of work, not just in aviation. So, I was happy to have a job. But I did get to do some Part 91 flying, and that was pretty cool too, to get to see that part of the industry. A company called Jet Suite, and it was really cool to do that. I did that for about 8 months before getting recalled, I think in 2011. And since then, I think they changed the name on the side of my plane another time. And worked for good old Legacy, as we're going to call it today. Yeah. Yeah. And so did that, when you came back from furlough, you came back before that merger.
So you were at Cactus Air, and then which later changed its name to All American Air. Let's just say that. And then All American Air then had a merger. Was it 2015? I think it was, and they turned into Legacy.
Yeah,
They merged with Legacy Airlines. So
something like that. I don't remember the exact dates.
Did that really affect you with each progressive merger in terms of seniority and equipment and flying and quality of life, or were you fortunate enough to kind of, other than the furlough, obviously, that made times tough for 3 years, but I mean, how did that affect you? The Moab, as they call it, the mother of all bids and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. We could probably do 10 podcasts to get into the ins and outs of the first merger. And you could probably write a couple books on how not to do a merger as far as integrating of work groups and the animosity. And it was legendary. Yeah. Between Cactus and we call All American, it was not good. And that really affected my quality of life just because we remained separate and I stayed junior during that whole time. And it really wasn't until the Legacy merger that it really kind of opened the floodgates and allowed opportunity and to have one list and move around if you want to and change aircraft if you want to. But yeah, I mean, through that whole time before, staying on the bottom, I'd say the bottom 95 percentile or so, just doing just reserve the whole for over a decade, it's definitely going to impede on your quality of life. Yeah. And that's what we deal with in the industry. It's just part of the deal. Mergers, downturns, furlough, it's all part of it. And I can, unfortunately say I've experienced it all now. I'm a seasoned aviation veteran here now.
Yeah. So did you get based in Los Angeles as a part of your initial upgrade at Legacy, or was that because of the shrinkage of the base in Phoenix?
Oh yeah, our base in Phoenix did shrink. I managed to hang on to that. We were shrinking for a decade. I think we went from 1,800 pilots to 1,200, and then with the Legacy merger, the domicile went from 1,200 down to 600 or so. I don't even know what it's at today, but I stayed in it that whole time. I never got kicked out of Phoenix. It was just that I'd been there long enough and I was ready to upgrade and experience the left seat that I decided to go ahead and leave the nest and become a commuter and go to Los Angeles. And I made the choice to do that. Yeah.
And that's a common question, especially once you become kind of a senior FO at whatever airline you're is, whether that's a regional airline or whatever operation you're flying, a mainline airline. Once you become a senior enough FO to where you can start to see it on the horizon, that illustrious fourth stripe, and you're like, do I upgrade on the first opportunity I get on the smaller jet in New York market, or do I hold off and wait until I can keep either this aircraft or maybe move on to another aircraft that I feel like I would enjoy, or a base I would enjoy, where I don't have to commute maybe, or maybe I'm willing to commute, but as long as I can hold a line and not be on reserve. And your experience, you've done this twice now in your career, either through because you've always had this idea in the back of your mind or someone taught you this early on, but you've always gone for that quality of life. So you didn't upgrade at the first opportunity, you waited. What really helped you choose to wait to upgrade at Legacy and then pick a base and stay on the same airplane? What was that thought process like?
That's it's going to be subjective to each pilot. Every pilot has individual goals. He might really just want to progress in his career and get that fourth stripe really quick. And others might not, care as much. I mean, me at that point in my career, I have two children, and they're young, so I wanted to be home as much as I could, so I'll take the right seat a little bit longer. And certainly I wasn't going to be entertaining getting the left seat in a place like we weren't moving for one. So I'm not going to do it in a place like New York or Philly or Miami, which were our pretty junior domiciles here at Legacy. or even, Charlotte is another one it's kind of senior, but it's far away. I really had to wait. But when it comes to Los Angeles and that being close, a lot of the guys in Phoenix had made that decision to, either upgrade on a narrow body there and make the commute, or the right seat of the wide body. That was another option that we're lucky to have available to us. And I went ahead and chose the left seat Airbus.
Yeah. And, your transition, having all those years behind your belt on the right seat of the same aircraft and then now moving to the left seat, do you really feel that was a huge advantage for you? Or do you think that it would have been the same no matter what, considering your time?
I know that it made training boring.
Boring is good?
No, yeah, boring is good. Boring is good. No, again, at this level, they're gonna train you, and you're gonna get through the program so that I wasn't, worried about being stressed, having not known the plane or something like that. But having known it for so long, I'm not gonna lie that they make us do a full program when we do upgrade. It doesn't matter if you come out on a different piece of equipment or the same equipment, you're moving to the left seat, you're going to go through the whole program.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
that's actually good. I like that idea. I mean, we had, I did a qualified upgrade at Sandpiper because I went from the right seat to the left seat of the same aircraft, and it was a very, very short course. Mm-hmm. And, there's maybe I think 5 sims and 6 days of ground school, and one of those days was what they call the Captain Charm School, which is not an FAA requirement. It was a company requirement that they want to make sure that you're thinking like a leader in a PIC. That's just very important, especially when you're dealing with a very young crowd of pilots.
Yeah, it's. I think at Mesa we had a shorter upgrade program as well, where you're going to get through much quicker, and it worked, and that was fine too. I guess for me, having to commute to my training, I would not have mind a shorter, more an upgrade course where if you're been flying the plane, that you're just going to be learning the seat. But it was fine. It was great to get back into the books once again, and really, because you lose some of the book knowledge. You start developing your own habits when you're on the line. You really, it's nice to get back into that time and learn the flows the way they're supposed to be, and really have the time. So I had plenty of opportunity to really get back into it and hone those skills and learn some things that I didn't know before. Even having flown the plane for that long, I could get into some details. I felt sometimes I was teaching my instructors a lot of the stuff, having flown the plane for so long, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I love it when your ears go up and you're like, what? That's not right. And your instructor's looking at you like, what?
So going from just the Airbus right seat, which you must have been pretty senior, to a junior Airbus captain, are the trips better?
Believe it or not, in Phoenix, I was not senior. Phoenix
because
is
of the low pilot numbers.
Well, it's a super senior domicile because of our mergers, and the group that's still there, an older group that lived there, because Cactus was for all intents and purposes a one domicile airline. So we all lived there, and so no one was leaving, and everybody stayed. So it's crazy when I started looking at seniority that my level as a Phoenix first officer was almost equal to my level as a LaGuardia captain, percentage-wise, and that's how senior Phoenix is. So unfortunately, I didn't get to a nice top level where I'm getting the juicy, nice trips as a senior. I was still.
So are your trips virtually halfway. The same?
There was no change. Yeah, I didn't have a
cushy schedule versus a.
No, I'm still waiting for that cushy schedule.
Aren't we all?
Aren't we all? Yes. Yeah. Someday, they tell me they tell me I'm going to inherit the airline. Still waiting for that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're young enough. You'll definitely be in the top 10% of the pilots out there. At some point before retirement.
That's the infamous last words, looking at it from right now.
You're going to upgrade, and just the way things are going, you're going to upgrade next year. Like, what?
Yeah, there's been plenty of those stories in the industry.
Do they even have any other aircraft types out of Phoenix, or is it just the Airbus? Do they have a 7.3 out of there?
No,
It's
not a
base for
domicile.
them. They're
They-
there.
Is it
they
just the
have-
Airbus?
Yeah, the 7.3s roll through, but they don't crew them out of Phoenix, which is unfortunate because I would have been, 7.3 or not. I'll be the first one to sign up for it if it looked like I was going to get back to Phoenix in the left seat quicker. I'd absolutely do it, but they haven't done that. They did have a small 7.5 domicile that used to exclusively do a Hawaii flying out of Phoenix, but they've dumped that whole fleet now, and we have the Neos, the A321 Neo that has the range to do Phoenix, Hawaii.
And to add insult to injury, most of the flying I did last month was as an LAX-based pilot. Would be a day of flying with an overnight in Las Vegas, and the next day Las Vegas, Phoenix to Hawaii. So it wasn't even being flown by Phoenix-based pilots. It was an LA-based pilot flying that leg. So it's not like the base is adding flying. By removing the 7.5, they actually got rid of flying out of that base.
Yeah, the flying has consistently gone down, and so who knows if I will be able to get back or when that will be as a captain. We'll see. It is. I'm not expecting that. It's not something.
So is the goal to Airbus? Is the goal captain in Phoenix or flying something bigger out of LAX? I guess becomes the question.
Yeah, as it sits right now, it's captain in Phoenix. I mean, I was forced with that choice when I was looking at upgrading. Do I move to the left seat in LA or do I go to the right seat of the wide body in LA? I've been told by people that that's a whole nother airline, just the way they treat you and just everything, from top to bottom, the flying you're doing. And I was looking forward to getting the fourth stripe. It's in 21 years I've been flying. It's few and far between. So I was ready to upgrade. I'm intrigued by the wide body overseas flying. You talked a little bit in the beginning about your experience in the time zones and things of that nature. That's not something that I relish. So, I mean, I will do it at one point, definitely, but I'm not chomping at the bit like some guys were, to get into that. It'll probably be for me well down the road after I'm probably back in Phoenix as an Airbus captain. If I'll choose to move left seat to left seat into a wide body way down the road, if that opportunity is given to me.
Yeah. And if nothing else, go do it and say you did it and then go back to the Airbus in Phoenix if you wanted.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe. I'm sure I will like it, but I'm not going to stretch or, again, lose that quality of life in order to do it.
Yeah. So what, we've talked about your journey and some of the challenges that you've overcome with all of the cyclical nature of the industry is a common phrase that we use amongst us aviators. What do you see are some of the most common issues, considering our current market, everything that we're all going through right now, on the flight deck? And how do you handle those?
I guess nothing is jumping out to me that is extreme, whether it be a safety related thing. I guess right now is what we're going through is the big thing is the COVID, so that's on everybody's mind, whether it be just looking at our industry wholly, the big picture and how it's going to affect us all going forward. And there were some dicey times of the last year where we all, I think, said, I hope my carrier will be here. I hope this industry is still going to look the same, a year from now, because it was scary, and unprecedented, lack of ridership. So we're all thinking about that. And operationally, it's been very interesting trying to make sure everybody wears a mask on the plane. As a captain now, not only am I flying, I'm captaining the whole crew and deal with, flight attendant issues and things going on in the back. And something I didn't have to do as a first officer for many years. So listening to their issues with passengers, I've had to kick a few passengers off. One was COVID related, one was not. That's a different world. I have to worry about that. But I think hopefully we're coming out of that now. And our industry will stabilize. Maybe some hiring will continue. The growth we all hope for will continue. And we'll look back on this time and the time we all had to wear masks. Wasn't that crazy? Hopefully it'll be like that. But
yeah, I hope so.
Yeah,
for sure. Definitely, I've seen an uptick on passenger disturbance issues and just people behaving badly. I mean, we've all seen these YouTube videos and Facebook videos of, all out brawls and WWE style wrestling matches happening in our airport terminals around the country. Every carrier, no one's immune. There used to be a time where, that was, so-and-so airlines. And, go figure. Nope. It happens on all of us. And unfortunately, we've become with how many mandatory PAs are we now having to give? And
I'm sick of making that same one over and over about the mask, but it is what it is. We have to make it, and are required to make it, because if we do have to kick somebody off, we have to say that we warned them this many times about the masks, and I've had to kick a few off because they refused to wear it. And it is what it is. But yeah, things are hopefully going back the other way. I mean, right now there certainly is a different socioeconomic status, I guess, that are able to fly that normally aren't, because we've had some very cheap airfares for a while, with very empty planes. And it did bring some, interesting things to the back of the plane, as far as arguments and what have you.
Yeah.
But I think that will hopefully, it's all cyclical and will change again.
So if a young man or woman or, even one of your own children said to you, I think I want to be an airline pilot, Dad, I see what you're doing. And, what would you say to them?
Oh gosh, I've thought about this quite a bit, and it's a hard question to answer, especially with my own son, because my son is now 10 years old, and he hasn't really expressed any interest in that as of yet. He does like NASA and rockets and stuff like that, but I don't know if I'd steer him this way. And honestly, what scares me the most is the fact that I think for me and your career, my career, all of our careers, we'll be fine. But someone who's my son's age wanting to be a pilot, I think our days are numbered. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
Man of automation that's up there now, whether it starts with one pilot on the flight deck, or one pilot and then the person next to him doesn't have any license, or is half licensed, and then it goes to one pilot, and then it goes to no pilots. I mean, they can take the plane. They can do it all now. It's just obviously, and as times change, and a millennial out there goes to the airport without even driving his car, it's not a big leap for him to get on an airplane that doesn't have a pilot. I mean, I bet that there's people in the, back in the 30s or 40s or whatever, that said, there's no way I'm going to get in an elevator without an elevator operator. Are you kidding me? Or like, the SkyTrain, those things are just rolling around. And I'm sure at some point someone said, I'm not going to get on a train without a conductor or something like that. But I think ultimately our days are numbered, and so that scares me, I guess, for my son's age. He's pretty young.
Yeah.
So I do think about that as far as maybe saying, that would be my biggest fear, is him putting in the effort and the time and the money it takes to be a pilot. And then 10 years into his career, there's nothing for him because they're shrinking the numbers of pilots out there as the, whatever,
Yeah.
It's going to happen. The question is, how long does it take and when does it happen?
Yeah. And Roger, what about yourself? I mean, you've got 2 young children around the same age. What would you say if one of them came to you and said, I think I want to be a pilot, Dad?
I'm thankful that neither one of them seems to have any interest in being a pilot. Because, I don't know. I think that what Jerry was just saying is possible. I think it's probably a little farther in the future, especially with passengers. If you want to talk about cargo, I think that's a totally different discussion. I'm sure that those guys are pouring billions of dollars into figuring out how to not have to pay pilots. In terms of the passenger, I think that that's a little farther in the future, but it's such a volatile industry. It's something that we talk about fairly often, with different guests. You were fortunate, Tony, that you haven't, ever went through the furlough and, today. Both of us have, and no matter how well it goes, it still leaves you a little bit scarred. I mean, he was happy, it sounds like you to fly any airplane or an airplane, but you're definitely taking a huge step back. And then you realize that there are thousands and thousands and thousands of other people in your same position who are applying for the same few positions. And that gets really hard. I can say, especially for me that had a family at the time trying to figure out what to do. And there are just, to be 100% honest, there are other things to do that are a little bit more stable. Now, that being said, even I think just yesterday I was talking to my son about it, who my son's 8. I have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old. I'm very grateful that the job I do, like it's a job, but I don't mind going to work for the most part. I mean, there's always those days. But the job that I get to do, I mean, it's hard. You're hard pressed to find a cooler job. I mean, to go flying over the face of the earth at 600 miles an hour and to see some of the things from the vantage point that we get to, it's something special. But over the course of a career, I don't know.
Yeah.
They're my kids and I love them. And I just, I hope they find something that they enjoy. I think that that's the most important part. And, like you and I have talked about before, Tony, is like, this is something that you have to love in order to survive it. I'm sure that Jerry would agree with that.
Yeah.
I hope that whatever my kids, I won't push them or, say, hey, I don't think you should do this. I just hope that they really love it no matter what they decide to pursue.
Yeah.
It's a very generic response to that question.
Well, I think it's a common response. I've asked people this question before, both here on the show and on the flight line. And a few people would say, absolutely, it's a great time. The technology and the population is growing, and those people need to get from point A to point B. And I don't think Star Trek is going to happen anytime soon with teleportation. So, and the public is going to demand to have a qualified pilot or two up there, because how many crashes? One crash is too many. And we see crashes with Teslas on auto drive, even though the company does a very good job at squashing any kind of media that comes out after a crash in a Tesla to prove that it was not on auto drive. But they happen, things happen, and mechanical things break. And that's why you need a human up there to use that wonderful noggin that they have, all those hundreds of thousands of dollars of education, to keep that airplane safely continuing on and handle the situation that is in that gray area that's not in the manual, that's not in the book. And so I don't think in our lifetime that we're going to start to see a reduction of the necessity for human pilots up there. I don't even think that we're going to see single pilot operations, although other countries and other countries' airlines have tried to put one qualified pilot and one, say, commercial pilot on a flight deck of a commercial airline. Not every airline in the world requires 2 PIC ATP qualified, I should say, pilots up there. This is pretty unique to America. There are plenty of countries up there that all you need is one captain and a commercial pilot with 300 hours in the right seat. And there's nothing wrong with that. So there's a huge difference between where we see the future of this industry going and the reality of where we are today. I don't know what I would tell my daughter. She's 15 and has absolutely zero interest in aviation whatsoever. And like what you've mentioned, both of you, I'm a little grateful for that, simply because I've struggled throughout my career. It wasn't always a walk in the park. I've been very fortunate not to be furloughed. We talked about my zero timeline experience here at Legacy Airlines, and that really wasn't that bad. The potential was there. The stress was high. But in the end, I came through it relatively unscathed. It's a great career to have. And I know what I've had to sacrifice to do it. And I know what my family's had to sacrifice to do it, to support me. And so I don't know if I'd want my child to have to sacrifice as much as I've had to. So that's why I asked the question. There's always that part of the debate that's out there. Now, if my daughter came to me tomorrow and said, I want to be a pilot, that's my joy. I love airplanes. I love airplanes. I love airplanes. Then I would support her because that's what her passion is. And I'd make sure that she would make the best decisions possible to really minimize the sacrifices that you have to make.
Mm-hmm.
So in all your years of flying the line, have you had any pretty hairy flights or experiences that you'd like to share?
Sure. There's a few. I mean, some good, some bad, some where, things were done very well. Others where we could have done some better things. I mean, the big thing is we learn from, the things that have happened. One particular one I'll talk about a good experience is I was actually a first officer at Mesa, and we took off out of Phoenix. I think we were going to Colorado Springs, and normal takeoff, didn't feel a thing. We're climbing on with a departure, and they said, "Hey, we want to relay a message from the tower." They said there was debris left on the runway. They think it was from you guys, and we both looked at each other like, I don't know, felt normal to me. So we continued on, and then 5 minutes later, the flight attendant came up or called up and said that passengers were really freaked out because it was really bumpy when we took off, and now it smells like rubber back here. Like, all right, well, it's putting two and two together. It's obviously we had some kind of an issue, and we're going to have to deal with that. So, I think I was relatively new first officer, and the captain was pretty new, but I remember him handling it very well, really slowing down during the emergency. Knowing that this is now irregular ops, and not speeding up, but getting just like everything slows down so we can go through, dot every I, cross every T, and get the plane on the ground. And he did what they teach you, good CRM. He included myself. He started calling the company and asking their opinions. We think we have a tire issue. Should we press on to Colorado Springs, or do you think we should come back to Phoenix? What do you guys? And then we made the decision, and ultimately he made the decision. We come back to Phoenix and land there. And we had no idea what was wrong. Honestly, it's only just what they told us about the tire. So we decided to come back. We did declare an emergency, and we're like, we decided to do a low pass. We don't know if we don't have any landing gear hanging out the thing now, or if it's a tire issue or what. Maybe it's not even us. Maybe that debris was there and we sucked a little up. Who knows? So we did a low pass. We dropped the gear, came around, let the tower take a look at our undercarriage, and they said it looked normal. They say we don't see anything different. So, okay, well, with that information, we'll come back around and we'll just do another approach and land. I think it was runway 26 in Phoenix. It's funny, and I'll never forget this, as we come back around, because we did take the time to let everybody know and talk to people and include people. It also gave everybody and their mom time to know that there was an emergency out there. I mean, the media outlets all listened to guard and all that. So by the time we did come around to land the plane, there was 3 helicopters hovering over the threshold of 26, just waiting for us to go up in a ball of flames at the end of the runway. Jesus. That's what they want, they want to see something dramatic happen. So, they gave us a discrete frequency and all that good stuff. And we came in and we're just going to do a nice long rollout, touchdown. And I don't think we had our passengers brace because, again, the gear looked good. And we rolled out and we still didn't feel anything. I think the nose wheel came down and had a little bit of a shimmy. So we thought, well, maybe that was the nose wheel. We had something, but we rolled off and into the little, area there for some overflow parking, and you feel kind of this when we were getting slower, like when you have a pop tire in your car, as you slow down, you finally feel boom, 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 boom. So we set the parking brake, and the plane is still going boom, 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 boom. And we look at each other like, what the heck? And we look down, and the vibration gauge on one of the engines is like off the chart. And we're like, okay, well, let's let's secure the engines here, and we're not going to move anymore. Call out a bus to get our passengers, on air stair, because we're not going to go anywhere. And apparently that's what happened. Is I got out and did a walk around, and I think it was the inboard tire on the number 2 landing gear, the right landing gear. The tread had completely come off. It was intact. It was still air in the tire, but it was just all you saw was cord, no more tread. And the underside of the flap was completely dinged up and black, where all the black, the tread had hit it. And on the other side, the top of the wing was sitting a bunch of the tire tread on the top of the wing. And then I looked up the side of the fuselage, and it was black all the way up, and then up into the engine, it's practically, the bottom half of the inboard flap. It's practically right below the intake of the engine. It had traveled up and almost came forward and gotten into that engine. All
sucked
that
up in there. Wow.
Yeah, and it sucked a lot up. I heard later that they did the scope on the engine. It was toast. It was done. But it was producing thrust, and we had no idea we had an engine problem until we got on the ground and we were at idle. And we're sitting there. Then you could feel the thing vibrating. No indications. And anyways, but that emergency was, I like to tell that one just because the captain I flew with did a great job, really just slowing down. We didn't have to rush back in or force a decision. You could include the company, you could include, obviously myself as a first officer, talk to dispatch, talk to mechanics, just ask opinions. And then we had plenty of fuel, and that was the thing. We had just started our flight, so that was an emergency and a success story. I like to tell.
That's a good one. And I know the CRJ well. And was that a 200 series that you were flying?
It was a 200.
Yeah, so the engine is literally right in line with the trailing edge of the wing. So to have debris go from under the wing, and then in its evaporation of tread and rubber and who knows what else, to get sucked back up and almost have to go kind of forward and then get sucked into the engine. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it made us wonder if we actually maybe had sucked more up on our landing with reversers and stuff. Obviously, we did suck stuff into the engine on takeoff because you wouldn't smell rubber in the cabin without. But I think we did more when we rolled out the second time.
Yeah,
to have the tread sitting on the top of the wing, obvious something like that did happen. But yeah, that was
well, thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah. One thing that was funny about that is, you're talking about the media and the helicopters. I told my wife at the time, I said, hey, I'm just letting you know everything's good. I'm fine. But we just had an emergency. I taped the evening news tonight, so I want to see what happens. And I did see they had a story on it. They had us in, tensions at Sky Harbor Airport this evening, and they show us as we come in, and then they talk about it, and they said they had a gear problem, and lo and behold, they have like the little circle around our nose gear. So that just tells you they
have no idea.
They don't really know what's going on. Yeah,
that's the gear right there. That thingy, that dangling thingy right there. It's a gear thingy.
I had a problem with this tire, and that wasn't the one.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. It's wonderful to hear, these successful outcomes, and this is part of the portion, what do you call it? Part and parcel of the career. That you have these scenarios. That's why it's important to have two crew members up there to make these kind of decisions when these irregular flight ops, as you called it, happen. And it's really where you earn your pay in one flight for the year sometimes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You'll get no argument out of me as far as that goes. Definitely.
Yeah. So, as we wrap up the show, I just again want to say thank you for joining us and sharing your journey with us. At this point, I want to ask you just a few last questions. If you can go back in time to a point where you're just thinking about starting a career in aviation and whisper in your younger self's ear, what would you tell yourself?
Oh, I thought about that a little bit. Gosh, there's a lot of little times during the course of the career you'd like to make some different choices, and this would have worked out much better if I'd done this. But ultimately, I'm very happy the way things turned out. One thing that comes to mind is when I was furloughed I applied at a company overseas. It was in the Gulf, in the Persian Gulf, one of the Gulf carriers. I actually got hired at that company and was ready to move with my wife. We didn't have kids. And they were very adamant that I resign my seniority, resign completely from the airline. I was on furlough and I didn't want to do that. None of us ever want to do that, and our chief pilots in the Phoenix domicile were saying, whatever, you turn that in and I'll just throw it in the garbage can, But this particular airline was checking up. They would literally call HR and make sure that you've resigned from the airline,
Yeah.
So I was going to be probably forced with doing that, but I was going to do it because I was kind of upset with, was it All American? Is that what we were calling it at the time, the way things were going? And, take this opportunity to reset my airline career, do something in a place that I'd never done, flying, and see some places I'd never see before. And who knows, have the opportunity later on. And then reassess the industry a few years down the road. But honestly, now I think hindsight 2020, I'm glad things turned out the way they did. I stayed. The furlough wasn't fun, but we obviously merged with legacy airlines, and things are going well. Absent the COVID blip, that's good. As far as further back in my, I wonder whether if I would have known I wanted to be a pilot earlier before getting into, and pursuing a bachelor's in 4 years of a bachelor in music degree, if that would have got me to the industry earlier. It's always very important to get here early and get your seniority early. And I wonder sometimes what my career would have looked like had I been in it 4 years or so earlier, which could have happened. But, that is what it is. This is the way it went down. And, as I'll tell you now, I don't think I'd change a thing. I enjoyed studying music and I enjoy what I do with that now. So.
Absolutely. Wonderful to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And if you could think back to a person that had the greatest impact to your success in aviation, who would that be? And what would you like to tell them?
Is it sad that I'm not, no one's popping into my head? I guess I didn't have really good mentors helping me along the way.
Done it on my own, and I did it my way.
There's a song about that, I think. Good old Frank.
Oh, gosh. There's not one. There's been a lot of good PICs because I spent a majority of my career in the right seat as first officer, and whether, teaching me the ins and outs of, it's what it's going to be like to be a captain, or where to go, or how to do this, just the advice from multiple people along the way. I'm very thankful to have, to help me to try to get to the major level quickly, and how to go about doing it and that kind of thing. I've had help from numerous people, and I'm very happy about it. So I can't think of one person right now. Support of my family. That's it. That's my answer. I'm sticking to that one.
That's it. Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you, Jerry, for giving us kind of a sliver of your journey, how you got to sitting in the left seat of an Airbus, flying a 2-day trip with me just the other day. I always enjoy flying with you. I think our personalities hit it off. Had a wonderful time on the layover. Thanks again for talk about generous captain. He shows up on day one, very first leg, with a bunch of pastries in LAX for the crew. Like, hey, you want some pastries? I got some pastries for the crew. Now, don't worry, your secret's safe with me. I'm not going to tell everybody we fly with to expect this. And then here we are in the Big Easy, getting ready for our flight, and it was just he and I, and we catch the hotel van or shuttle to get to the airport, and we know that our flight attendant or cabin crew were doing the turn. So, they brought the airplane in, and it was going to be a pretty quick turn. And sure enough, as soon as we got there, he's like, "Come on, let's go get some beignets for everybody." And I'm like, "Wow, okay, some donuts here, huh? Covered in powdered sugar." Yeah. So yeah, he hooked us up. He hooked up the crew. They were all very grateful. Talk about a good way to make a good impression.
I hope you're paying attention, because that's one of the things I flew with a guy that did that, and he did it more than me. He did it on every leg.
Oh, wow.
He literally every leg would be like, or at least every new crew would go to them and say, do you know what kind of coffee do you want? Like, what do you want to eat? And, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. He's going to go get it, I haven't been that generous, but when I start a trip, I like to, it's always good to have them on your side,
Yeah. You break down those walls of communication and you really do set the tone,
Absolutely. The more I can do it, the better. So, yeah.
Yep. I'm taking notes, buddy. I'm taking notes.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say thanks again for joining us. Anything you'd like to say out there as a final thought?
Oh, no, I think we've touched on a lot. I appreciate you having me on. Yeah, I like this format and appreciate the opportunity to share my story. Yeah, nice to meet you too, Roger. Nice to hear the beginning part about the other side. Maybe down the road, yeah, well, of course, we all have, as aviators, we have a bazillion stories. So, I have, I saw Part 91 stories too from when I was furloughed, and we can explore more of that next time.
Oh. Yeah, it sounds like a plan. It's great to meet you as well. And thank you very much for being willing to share your story.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And thank you to all the frontline workers out there, the doctors, nurses, pharmacists, EMTs, medical techs, firefighters, law enforcement, grocery store employees, truck drivers, Amazon workers, and of course, all the airline employees that show up to work every day to provide essential services that we do. Now we just need to get these eateries reopened at the airports around the country so we don't have to wait in line for half an hour to get a $30 cold sandwich and an $8 cup of coffee. Yeah, I said it, so what? Here we are. Just enjoying every single moment of our careers. We hope that you, the listeners out there, are also enjoying Squawk Ident. Please help us out by making sure to follow the show on whatever podcast player format you're listening to it on. If you like what you hear, spend just a moment and write us a review, especially if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. It really does help us out. And share the show with a friend. Let someone know that, hey, there's this podcast out there with these crazy Aviator Tony guy and his co-hosts and these guests. And, if you like what you hear, definitely we appreciate your feedback as well and your support. You can send us feedback either through our website at aviatortony.com, or a lot of these podcast players have a feedback button that you can use. On the website at aviatortony.com, that's Alpha Victor, the number 8, Romeo Tango, Oscar November Yankee.com. You can find audio archives, photos from the flight line, the Squawk Ident pilot shop, guestbook photo tab, and under the Contact Us tab, you will find a link to something called SpeakPipe, and you can send us like a 90-second audio clip. Anything longer, record it on your phone and just send us an email at aviatortony@gmail.com. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram users can find us under the Squawk Ident podcast. One final thank you to Captain Jerry Quinn for sharing his wisdom with us today. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to these grateful aviators. Keep the dirty side down out there. Be safe and take care of each other. Bye, y'all.